U.S. Treasury Secretary Tim Geitner has had Chicken Little syndrome over the fate we'll meet when we've reached the debt ceiling. But suddenly the sky isn't falling. And Mr. Geitner has miraculously found the money to stretch our ability to borrow until August. But it's how he did it that has the attention of my freedom fighters, Fox Business reporter and my colleague Ashley Webster, radio host of Freedom Watch regular Nancy Skinner, and Loyola University economics professor Dan D'Amico, who joins us in the studio today. Dan, welcome here. Welcome to all of you, my colleagues. Dan, to you first. Surprised that the Secretary of the Treasury has come up with a gimmick to extend the debt ceiling from the middle of May to August. August, isn't that when the Congress is away for a month?
Well, I mean, the logic for raising the debt ceiling up until now has been something like, heavens to Betsy, we don't raise this debt ceiling. People might realize that we can't pay our bills, and I think that that's actually true. We probably can't pay our bills. I mean, what's really surprises me is that the government was surprised about how much money they could tax from its citizen base in order to afford putting this off.
Does the government, Nancy Skinner, lose credibility when they make a major change like this from the middle of May to the end of August after trying to scare the daylights out of members of Congress that if they don't raise the debt ceiling, the economy will be in the tank?
Judge, he found some pocket change under the cushions of the couch.
That's about what it was, Nancy. Right, right.
I mean, we're not and the reason is, the important reason is because tax receipts were a little bit higher because the economy is getting better, because all these things that we often talk about are now working. The stimulus is working, so now the quantitative easing is working. People are going back to work. Tax receipts are a little better. Oh, yeah, but it doesn't change the overall math or the picture that we have to do.
All right, I get your argument, Ashley. It's because we just experienced April 15th, where the government collected over $1 trillion in taxes on one day. This has nothing to do with the stimulus working, that they suddenly have more cash.
Of course. You know, it's ridiculous, and I know I hear this example over and over again, but it's probably the easiest one, is you max out your credit card.
Right.
You can't get anything more on that credit. So then what do? You kind of find ways to make it work. You don't turn the lights out and sit in the house and just kind of, curl up in a fetal position and suck your thumb. You go out and find ways to pay off some of that debt to allow you to borrow more.
How does the financial community feel about the continual extension of debt and the rolling of it over? So if we owe $2.3 trillion, which I think we owe pretty soon, they're just going to go out and borrow another $2.3 trillion to pay off the $2.3 trillion that we owe. Does the financial community like that?
I think it's inevitable that you're going to see more quantitative easing. You're going to see a monetizing of this debt. I mean, the expectations.
You mean that Ben Bernanke is going to print more cash even after he reached the $600 billion?
We've seen some of those expectations reveal themselves in the financial markets. The reason why the expectations of these new tax dollars are above what they were before is because the government's bad at forming its expectations.
Should we believe Tim Geitner when he says the sky will fall in August, Nancy Skinner?
No.
Yes, because it's not the credit card analogy doesn't work here. These are global financial markets.
What?
And our dollar, full faith and credit of the United States. Okay, that means a lot. And so when you lose that, it's never happened for us to even get to the point where people question whether we will honor that will affect us for generations. So Tim Geitner, he's trying to stretch it out to give Congress some room. There should be no linkage between budget deficit reductions, which have to happen, and the debt ceiling. They should be completely disconnected.
Do you think the debt ceiling will go up, Ashley? Do you think the Republicans in the House will cave?
I do. I think the Republicans painted themselves into a corner. They ran many of these people on a no more spending. Many of their constituents are saying, don't raise the debt limit. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
All right, switching gears. A very interesting proposal today from Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Barney Frank. He's waging a war with the Federal Reserve, attempting to get Congress back into its constitutional game. Congressman Frank basically wants to remove the private bankers from the Federal Open Market Committee. That's that part of the Fed that makes major decisions. Dan is a libertarian, is an Austrian economist, is a pure free market person, as you are and as you know that I am as well. Moved by this. In one respect, it follows the Constitution, which says Congress shall coin money and set the value thereof. In another respect, it gives two-bit political hacks like Congressman Frank more say over the economy.
I mean, in terms of Austrian analysis, what it's doing is making a more centralized authority out of the Federal Reserve. It's purging the more local responsiveness. Right. And so, I mean, these two stories are related. Government wants a more reliable mechanism to adjust the money supply in response to these increased debt ceilings.
Nancy, I'm curious as to your views on this. So would you favor less influenced by private bankers in the country's monetary supply and more by politicians, or do you favor it the way it is now?
I think that they should be consulted, obviously, but to have the vote that they do, it's like saying, you know, if you're deciding on a mortgage, I get a say in that decision. You know, I mean, obviously they want to tighten credit. This Thomas Honig wants to tighten credit because he has his own private interests at stake, and it's not the economy at large at stake. So that's what the Fed does. We look at, well, do we need to grow, or do we need to worry about inflation?
All right, so you want the more political influence, Nancy, or you don't?
I think that the government, I think the Fed should be deciding what's best for the economy. These guys, they interject their own private interests.
Ashley, are you surprised about this? This was in Dodd-Frank, and then they dropped it. Now he wants to institute it again.
Come back, but making this part of the political cycle is just asinine. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. You need the input, whether you believe them or not, from the financial side, to have that technical expertise. If you purely bring this down into politics...
Do you know that you're looking at two people that not only want to audit the Fed, we want to end the Fed?
If Nancy were right, which she's not,
audit.
Even on her own terms, you'd still want these sort of local informants in those discussions. The government doesn't have this knowledge necessarily. What they really need is more dispersed knowledge to inform the economic
should they vote? Should they have a vote?
All right.
Because they do.
Okay, understood. Last question. Wall Street actually wants the bankers in there, right?
Of course they do. They want some expertise. Some would say they want to be able to, well, you know, have some influence.
A lot of influence. Ashley Webster, Dan D'Amico, Nancy Skinner, thanks for joining